thankfully to the Richland Library for allowing us to use the space, because our program space has been occupied by collections for the last year. But it may be reopening this fall, so we'll see. Although, I have to say that the facilities here are fantastic. I wish we could do something like that relatively, but I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime. We will have another presentation next month on the 12th by my colleague Ben Batiste. He did this program earlier this year on the history of the M16. So if you haven't heard his presentation and you don't know much about the M16, or you know a lot, and you'd like to quiz him, he's well available. He's a veteran of 20 years in the Army, so he knows about the M16 pretty well in its evolution. And now, and one last thing I want to let you know about, I have some more free passes. If you have not been to the museum to see the Vietnam exhibit, you're welcome to take some of these at the end, and you can go down after the presentation or go at another time during our opening hours. The only time we're not usually open is on Sundays, except for the first Sunday of the month. So, and we have a sign-in sheet. If you have not signed in before, if you would like to put your name and email out there, we can send you notices of our upcoming program. Oh, and by the way, Ben's presentation will be at the West Columbia Library this time, not here. Okay, and now, yes, sir.
I just got an email from you having a flash sale at the gift shop.
Yes, we are. I was told about that. We have a flash sale today and tomorrow, 15% off. So if you're so inclined.
Prom days.
Now, without further ado, let me introduce our speaker, Glen Inabinet. I've gotten to know Glen over the last several years. Before I knew much about him, I knew he was a historian and a high school teacher, social studies history, and he taught in the Camden high school system for over 30 years. So he's well versed in research and has written with his wife Joan a history of Kershaw County, and I know he's written other things with his wife, but upcoming, which is fascinating because it's now the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, they're working on a book about the everyday lives of people in Camden during the British occupation. Now that ought to be fascinating, because not many people deal with the everyday lives of people, and I'm looking forward to that coming out. But Glen has recently published a book about his experiences in Vietnam. As you'll find out, he was trained as an artilleryman, and that changed. That never happens in the military, right? And but it's fascinating. I interviewed him in 2018, so I had an inkling of what his book was going to have in it. And once you read it, it is fascinating. And so it is available for purchase afterwards if you'd like to get a copy. And if he runs out, you can run down to the relic room. We have more down there for you to purchase. So, Glen, thank you for being here. I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Clint. Very good. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. One of the pieces of information that came out about today said this was going to be a lecture. Relax. It's not going to be a lecture. It's going to be a slideshow for the most part. And I'll talk about the slides as I go through them. I did not ever intend to write a book about Vietnam. I did not keep a daily log or anything like that. I did have a camera with me most of the time I was there, and I took photos. And I was an old man when I got over there. I was 25 when I landed in Vietnam. Most of you probably know the average age was 19. So, I was an old codger going over. But I was married. I graduated from college. My wife, Joan, here. And I wrote letters. We didn't have cell phones back then. So for the entire time I was gone, which was 401 days, who was counting? 401 days, we never spoke on the telephone. But we wrote letters, and we tried to write one another every day. Didn't always work out that way, but that was our attempt. So we had lots and lots of letters that were saved. And some years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I started thinking, she and I have written a number of things, and we've done a lot of research, and we run across documents with names, and we don't know who the names represent. Or photographs, and we recognize maybe one person in the photograph, don't know who the other people are. And we would ask one another, we think, oh, if so-and-so were alive, he could tell us, or she could tell us exactly who those other people were and what the story was. And so I guess that got me thinking, one of these days, I'm not going to be around. The letters might still be there. Hopefully my collection of slides will still be there. But I didn't want my children, grandchildren, or whatever to come across these things and say, what's this all about? Who are these people? What was going on? And so my idea was just to write down some things and maybe put it on a binder and have it for the family. And the more I got into it, the more it sort of grew as a project. I thought, well, I think I'll pitch this to a publisher and see if I can get it published. I did, and they accepted it. And this was the result. I called it Mekong Memoirs because it's based not on a diary I kept, but on the letters and on the photographs. And my process for writing it, I sat down and I just started typing out things that I remembered. I know I've got some veterans in here. I see my head here. That's some of you too young to have been in there, but you've got memories. You could sit down. If you sat down and started writing out things, you'd be surprised what things would come to you. But you'd probably write down some event, but now exactly when was that? Fortunately, I could go back to the letters, and many of the things that I'd written down that I remembered, I'd written in letters. There were things I wrote in letters I didn't remember, and that fogged my memory. But I have a peg to hang, dates to hang things on. And so this is chronological. It starts out really with things I'm not going to talk about today, but the background of how I ended up in the military, how I ended up in Vietnam. I'm just going to talk about Vietnam today. But if you want to know the background, my experiences in basic training and in artillery training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. But I will put in a plug here. If you have not seen this exhibit, I don't know how much longer it's going to be up. It's been up longer than I thought it was going to be, but it's still up. Do go. It is very well done. I think you will have a great appreciation for it. And there is a section in there toward the end, which I'll call, I don't know if they call it a wall of honor, but it's kind of like the Vietnam Wall, but it's the South Carolina veterans. It's those, our comrades that didn't come back. We're fortunate, but it's in honor of those. One last thing, when I first came back, people would talk to me, and there would be maybe World War II guys, other civilians, younger. They'd say, "Were you on the front lines?" When they asked me that question, I knew they didn't have a clue about Vietnam. And so I had to be very careful how I answered their questions because they didn't understand that this was not a traditional war. No matter where you were, if a person could be in the middle of Saigon in a clerical position and never walk around armed, he could be in as much danger as somebody who was out in the field. Maybe not as often, maybe not 24 hours a day, but there was no place that was not a combat zone potentially. The handout I'll refer to briefly right now, and then I do have a slide that you can see the map much larger. For any of you who are not familiar with Vietnam, this is only South Vietnam. Of course, it's a united country today, but kind of a skinny, long country. Distance approximately from New York to Disneyland in Orlando. The narrowest point is about 31 miles. So very skinny in some areas. It had 44 provinces, South Carolina has 46 counties, so you can kind of get an idea what a province was. I was in Long An province, which is down below Saigon, the capital. In 1968, Florida had a population of about 6.8 million, South Carolina about 2.5 million. South Vietnam's population was 16 million. So a relatively small area, land-wise, about the size of Florida, as far as square miles, but very heavily populated. Agricultural, mainly rice, rubber, coffee, tea, fruit, vegetables. I was in the rice paddies in the Mekong Delta. Last thing I want to mention, because you can't talk about or understand Vietnam if you don't understand the terrain and the temperature and the rainfall. We have, in South Carolina, we have 5 seasons. One of them's hurricane season. Okay. In Vietnam, there are 2 seasons: hot, wet, hot, dry. That's it. Where I was now, I know if any of you gentlemen were up toward the DMZ, you went in an area where it may have gotten cold at night occasionally. Where I was, it never got cold. We were not issued field jackets, anything like that. It was either hot and wet or hot and dry. And it didn't rain, 12 months of the year like it does here. It rained approximately 6 months of the year. And if you look at the statistics on the bottom, for South Carolina, our average rainfall over 12 months is 47 inches. In Mekong Delta, it ranged from 55 to 95 inches in half that time. When it rained, it rained. If you saw the movie Forrest Gump talked about the rain. The temperature in South Carolina, our average high is 77.91, and the average low is 54.4. In Republic of Vietnam, the average high was 90.33. So the average 90, you can imagine how warm it got. And the average low is almost 76, 75.5. So anyway, a little geographical information there, and I will point out where I was as we go along on the slide. And I'll be glad to answer questions following the presentation. I was in in a fire support base. And a fire support base was an enclosure or compound which had artillery and infantry and other things, depending on the size of it. It was near a little village called Tan Tru, and so it was called Tan Tru Fire Base. I was in Long An Province, and I was there in 1969 and 1970. All of the photos you're going to see today, I took, unless I'm in them, and generally one of my buddies got my camera and took a picture of me. This was our perimeter. Our compound is back here, and on the perimeter, berm as we called it, we had at about every 50 yards or so a bunker. And these would be manned at dusk until daybreak by 3 or 4 men taking shifts. And I don't know who these people are. I might have known at the time, but they are, this person has just been posted on guard duty. He's standing up here, and he's reading a correspondence from home. And I thought this would be appropriate. I wanted that to be my cover, because this was about correspondence and the importance of correspondence. Mail call was the most important part of the day. If you got a letter from home, you felt blessed. If you got more than one, you felt double or triple blessed. All right, this is the same map you have, which shows all the different provinces from the demilitarized zone all the way down to Saigon, which was the capital of South Vietnam at that time, and there's Long An Province. So I could have been a little deeper in the Delta, but actually our battalion headquarters, our division headquarters was right down here at a place called Dongtown, and mostly it was South Vietnamese forces way on down here. But this is the Mekong River that widens out and forms a big delta. I was not on the Mekong, I was on this other river that also had a delta that flowed into the South China Sea. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, talk.
Can you hear me in the back? Okay.
Talk.
Okay, sorry.
Back.
This is a detail of the map. Here's Saigon. There was one paved highway that ran into the Mekong Delta. It was Highway 4. And notice on this, you can see the plain of reeds, which I refer to in my book and I'll refer to here. There's actually the Mekong River. And this is the river that I was on right here. And I was at that point on this, which is another detail. This Highway 4. Tan An was our battalion headquarters. The Tan True Village was right here on the river, and our base camp was right here. And those two parts of this Vamco River, I'm probably mispronouncing it, flowed together and formed one river and flowed into the South China Sea. On the ground, this is very typical, a little small Vietnamese village. Most of the houses, excuse me, have to get used to. Most of the houses were made out of thatched nipper palm, which were the fronds from the palm trees. Some of them were reinforced with cardboard from packing boxes. If they were really lucky, they might find a little piece of tin, a little piece of plywood or something, and a few of them had tin roofs. But most of them, the traditional Vietnamese peasants' homes were like that. Notice the bicycles, a lot of bicycle traffic, small motorcycles, not a whole lot of cars. The rice paddies surrounded all around here. And this is a rice paddy, or several rice paddies actually, in the Delta. I don't know what this gentleman is doing, and I'll point out, if you know anything about photography, it looks like I'm slightly elevated. I'm in the back of a truck, a moving truck. Most of the time, most of the photographs that I took were like this. Nowadays, if I see something that's photogenic that I want to take, if I have a safe place to pull off the road and I have a camera, I'll pull off the road and I get out and take time to compose, maybe take several shots. I didn't have the luxury of doing that. It was snap it or lose it. So I have no idea what this Vietnamese man is doing, what kind of tool he has, but this is cultivated rice during growing season. The rice paddies are flooded and the rice flourishes. And then you see over here the tree line, and when we were there's also a water buffalo here. That was a tractor. I was in one of the richest agricultural areas in the world. I never saw a tractor the whole time I was there, but I saw an awful lot of these. But the tree line we were always wary of, because if we went out on an insertion, we would be landed by helicopter in an open area, and we had to be very careful about being ambushed from one of the tree lines. Now, I'm flipping to a totally different season of the year. This is harvest season. This is not the same rice paddy, but it's another one in the Mekong Delta. And the rice was being harvested traditionally then in 1969. This was either 69 or 70. Rice was being harvested then the way it had been harvested for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And actually, it goes back to biblical days, gathering up the sheaves of grain with the hand scythe, cutting it off, and then threshing the heads into a basket with a screen. And these contraptions here were kind of like sleds. When they were full, they would drag them across the ground with water buffalo. And the mat had one purpose. It surrounded it, so when they threshed the rice onto the screen, there was a compartment for it to drop into. That was to just keep it from spreading and the wind blowing it all over the field. And this is the only time I saw this going on, so I feel very, very fortunate to have been able to witness this. This is an aerial shot from a helicopter of a part of our compound. I'll give you an idea of the size of it. That's the village, Tantru Village, and the road leading down into our compound. These are all, this is maybe half. Compound would have extended on over into here, but this is where I spent most of the time in living in one of the hooches here. You can see artillery emplacements here, 105 millimeter howitzers. There should be 6 that you can count. The ammo dump is here, and various and sundry other types of buildings. There was one dirt road, and I say dirt, it was clay, it was mud in the rainy season, it was hard-packed clay in the dry season, which led from our compound out to Highway 4 and Tanan City, where our battalion headquarters was located. We called it Thunder Road. And you can see the dust. This is during the dry season. This deuce and a half is coming along into our camp. And you can also see that there are little villages and houses out fairly close to where we are. And again, the berm with some of the bunkers there. All this was rice paddy at one time before the Americans came in and built this. So the water there is not, it wasn't like a moat that was intentionally dredged around it. It was just a low area from a rice paddy that might have been excavated a little bit, but it filled up and it had held water. Even during the dry season, there were places like this that were wet. Our compound is back here. It looked a little bit like an old Western fort with the observation deck there at the entrance. And this was a trash dump. We and the Vietnamese were not very kind to the country, particularly us. You can see a lot of old drums, metal drums, and these are canisters that artillery rounds were shipped in, just all kinds of trash. And not very proud of that. This was my home for the first, week or so that I was there. I referred to it, and the word hooch, if you're not familiar with this, any dwelling that we lived in or that the Vietnamese lived in was called a hooch. And unless it was something, like some big mega mansion or something that a wealthy person lived in, and I saw very few of those. I called it a duplex apartment because if you entered this door and turned right, you'd go into this part of it. This is where I lived with probably 11 other guys, maybe. Like I said, for a relatively short time, but this is where I was when I first got there. No windows in it. And this one has screen, and it has these slats to offer a little bit of breeze. This is just simply made out of sandbags and ammo boxes and metal and tin on the roof. The sign "Clear Weapons" before entering. We kept our M16s with us at all times. You went to bed at night, you lay down, your M16 was right beside you. But we were not to have them locked and loaded inside the building. When you came out, you locked and loaded. Notice also, this is during the dry season, but notice under here is standing water. So mosquitoes, yes. Big problem.
Did you have, going back to that image, did you have electrical power? Is that what that cable was?
There was, I don't recall that there was any electrical power in these. Now, later on, some of the hooches did have electricity powered by generators. And I was fortunate enough to be in one at one time, and I had a little fan, about like that. And, oh, that was nice for sleeping.
But the generator power is not really consistent, predictable, but it was better than nothing. But that probably was a commo wire, but I don't recall any electricity in there at all. This is what I refer to as Main Street of Tantru compound, at least our part of it, the artillery part. The building here with the banana trees in front, I never saw any bananas growing on, but I guess it was good decoration. That was our mess hall, and then there were other buildings for supply and different functions along here. I alluded to the bunkers earlier that were on the perimeter. This is the one that I manned when I had guard duty, and you can see another one a little further down. Again, these are made out of 105 millimeter ammo boxes that have been emptied and filled with clay and sandbags, and we call them sandbags, but it's pretty much clay. With ports here for firing and here. And we've gone guard duty about dusk and stay there in alternate shifts until daybreak. Concertina wire, which is this curved, curled barbed wire all around it. There were also strings of wire that had metal cans with little pebbles and metal objects in it that would make a noise if anybody happened to bump up against it. And this almost looks like the backdrop for a baseball or a softball diamond. That was there in the event that the enemy fired a rocket. Hopefully it would detonate on that before it came into the bunker. Shortly after I arrived there, I noticed that engineers came out. They began building these structures. These were the new hoochies. The walls were about 2 feet, 2.5 feet thick, made out of very heavy treated materials and filled with mud. And the roof was also about 2 feet thick. No windows, only 2 doors, one on each end. You could walk straight through. This one hasn't not been completed yet. They built a wall right out here that you could walk around from either side to go in, and it made it more protected from shrapnel, but it also made it a lot hotter. At least this way, the air, if there was any breeze blowing, it could circulate straight through. But for breeze to go around the walls, it was pretty difficult. They were secure. It's a good place to be if you were, being attacked or anything like that. It was not a pleasant place to try to sleep. I think I was standing on top of one of the taller buildings that, again, this is the main street. And you can get an idea. It goes on to, there was an infantry company. I'll speak more about that in just a moment. Down at this end, there was another infantry company back over here. We had a commo or a communications unit. When I first got there, somewhere down here was a group of 155 millimeter self-propelled howitzers that looked like tanks, and they were not there very long. They pulled out and went somewhere else. You can see the river, and not too far from our the perimeter of our compound. This is on top of one of the bunkers. Machine gun is locked and loaded and ready to go. Now, my training was in after basic training, which I thought would be, right here in Fort Jackson. I was in Camden, and I thought, I'll have basic at Fort Jackson, maybe get home on leave and get to see my wife. Nope. Got my orders. Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. That was about as far away as I thought I could go. Then I went to Fort Sill, and I trained to do what these guys are doing. This is a 105 millimeter howitzer. You can see the size of the shell it fires. And the the rounds had to be assembled. They came in sort of a kit, in a box, 2 per box, in these canisters, and these are bags of powder. If you were firing a maximum charge, it was called a number 7. The bags are numbered 1, 2, 3 through 7, and your maximum charge had all 7 bags in it. If you were firing a shorter distance or something else, you might fire a number 3 charge or number 4 charge. But this guy on the left is assembling the rounds, putting the fuse on it, and these others are in the process of firing. You can see the black smoke. They just fired a round. This fella's pulled the lanyard to fire it, and there's another guy over here sitting at a desk with a pad, and he's getting the data that comes in from fire direction control, giving it to these guys who will swivel the tube around 360 degrees to fire. You can fire 360 degrees. The maximum effective distance for the 105 is 7 miles. And most of the time, we were firing out, I'd say 4 to 7 miles. The only time you would ever know what you were firing at and actually see your target, you wouldn't want to be. Because that would mean the enemy was right on you, and you put in what was called a beehive round, which was a round that had, each round had 10,000 stainless steel darts in it. It was an anti-personnel, and you fired it straight out at an army that was coming after.
Sometimes they put old powder, then soaked in diesel, and then fired that, didn't they?
We did not,
Flint
but
stuff?
we did not, but I would not be surprised.
How did you
Go ahead.
aim those? Because it looks like it's a small area. Did you use collimators, or did you
All
use
right.
aiming?
I don't remember every detail about it. You probably wouldn't want to hear every detail anyway. But actually, in training, what we did, there's a what's called a transit. I don't think you can see it here, but it looks like a surveyor's transit that's mounted to the gun.
Yeah.
And you'd put out, it was either 2 or 3, I think it's 2 posts at a certain distance, and you would aim on that, and that would be your setting. And then you'd get data from the forward observer, who was on the other end, we're calling in the fire. And that would come into what was called FDC, or Fire Direction Control, and it would be based on azimuths on a compass point. And that would be translated by Fire Direction Control into settings for the guns. And you see these numbers all around, 2200, 2400, 2600, etc. Those were marked all around the area, and they would rotate firing based on that. That's kind of a simplification.
Yeah, I was familiar with sticks.
Right.
But we used to put them out 50, 100 yards.
Yeah. That sounds right.
The near far line. Yeah.
Right.
But that's what I was wondering. It looks like you don't really have that kind
No,
of space in there.
I don't recall the sticks actually being there, but they would have a base point and then rotate off of that. Now, after about a week of being on the guns, doing what those guys were doing, I got volunteered to be a radio telephone operator, or an RTO. And I went with down, same base camp, same compound, same division, 9th Division, but I was assigned to Alpha Company, 2nd and 60th Infantry, and I'd never been in a helicopter. I'd never studied, never learned anything in training about being an RTO, calling in fire, anything like that. So it was definitely OJT. I got instructions from my recon sergeant the night before we went out on the first mission. So it was quick learning. And what we would do, we would go out just outside the gates of our base camp, And the Huey helicopters, or the slicks as we call them, you can see there are at least 4 or 5 hovering here. They would land in a straight line. We would board. These had a crew of 4, 2 here, and then a door gunner on each side. There was a jump seat here, and the officers or NCOs would normally sit on the jump seat. The rest of us would sit on the edge and just let our legs dangle down by the skids, like this. I'm in one chopper sitting like they're sitting, and got this. But you can see the countryside there in the Mekong Delta. It's flat. It's all rice paddies, except for the the occasional tree lines. And this is during the dry season, but you can still see there's a lot of water in different places. A little bit out of focus, but a little bit closer. It was nice. First time I went up, air conditioning. And it really felt nice, and view was just stunning.
Roll your sleeves down first time.
Yeah. And then, unfortunately, the first time I went out, we started going in, started hearing all this noise, and we went into a hot LZ. And that was my indoctrination. I felt something, kind of a little hand in my back, and I couldn't make out what was being said. And then it was said the second time a lot louder, jump! And I really thought we were about 10 or 12 feet off the ground. It was probably more like 5 or 6. But I jumped, and I landed this deep in mud. And there was all kinds of stuff going, grenades being fired, and the door gunner was firing, and so forth. And it's hard to walk in that kind of stuff. But I got to cover as quickly as I could, and just started doing what we were supposed to be doing. That's me on the horn, or with the hand set up to my ear, sitting right next. The door gunner's right over there next to me, and this is a Huey either coming in or taking off, and we had a term particularly for the evacuation of wounded called dust off, and you can see why it would be called a dust off, because when the helicopter took off, the prop would just throw up dust like that all over the place. This is me with the map. My radio is stacked right behind me, and we're getting ready to go across this rice paddy to that tree line, because we knew the enemy's not going to be out here in the rice paddy. They're going to be hiding if there ain't any enemy there. And once we start crossing this, if there ain't any enemy there, we have to have predetermined firing zones or targets, and we would designate those. I don't know if you can tell, the map I have is encased in plastic, and it's a very detailed, it was almost like a topo map of a very limited area, and we had a grease pencil that we could write things on. We designated a target or 2, or maybe 3, and we would say back over here, maybe in this tree line, call this target 1 Alpha, 1 Bravo, 1 Charlie, something like that. We would call in the coordinates to our Fire Direction Control Center, and they would have 1 gun out of the battery of 6. They would have 1 gun loaded with a white phosphorus round, which is a marking round. And in the event that we started going across here and we took fire, we got ambushed, we'd drop and take what little bit of cover we could, but instead of having to try to figure out where we were and where the enemy might be, if they were close to one of our targets, we'd call for Willie Peter 200 up, which meant a white phosphorus round 200 meters above the ground. And if this is, let's say the enemy is right here, and our target 1 Bravo is right here. If that white phosphorus round bursts and you have this big cloud of white smoke, and it's directly over your target, you know you're dead on them, and they can drop and start firing high explosive rounds. If the white burst is over here and the enemy's here, then you have to make an adjustment. But that's how we would make the adjustment, come up with a, compass direction to give the fire direction control. Traveling out in the Delta was quite difficult. We could either walk through the mud, which was not pleasant at all, or we could walk along the dikes, which was also scary because you've got a little bit of vegetation and grass and places. If you notice, every man here is looking down. They're spaced out, first of all. They're not clustered together. And everybody's looking down to watch where he puts his foot. Watching out for anything that looked wrong, or, grass that was out of place, or a little piece of wire, or anything like that. This is me right here. You can see the long antenna. And I showed you on the map the plain of reeds, which was this vast area out near the Cambodian border. This is what it looked like on the ground. Nothing there but insects, enemy. There was almost always something burning there. You can see smoke in the background, and lots of enemy. That's me with there's a map in my pocket, there's a radio on my back, and the long antenna, which was necessary for reception out there. It was very uncomfortable. This is a light observation helicopter, or a loach, and the loach works as an observer, usually for an attack helicopter, which you can see up here. And if you look in the background, you can see smoke. There was a little VC bunker back over here, and the Cobra had made a couple rounds over here and blown it up. And the loach is coming down to take a look and make sure it's been neutralized. This is also in the plain of reeds. This is called the Bobo Canal, and the pock marks were all made by artillery strikes or air strikes or whatever. And they ranged in size from being maybe the size of that little table right there to being half the size of this open area right here, depending on what hit it and I guess what time of the year, how hard the ground was when it hit. This is just kind of a typical path that we would have to go down sometimes, and this isn't particularly dense. A lot of them are more dense than this, but you can see here that visibility is pretty short, and an enemy could conceal himself back in there very easily. We were waiting for pickup. We finished doing one of our excursions, and we were waiting on an open area to be picked up by helicopters to be taken to another area. This was my recon sergeant, and we've got our M16s and our radio stack here, and you see the little village back here. Children would come out and they always ask us for candy or sea rations or something like that. If we had something, we'd give it to them. This is during the rainy season. This mama sign, which is a term we use for Vietnamese females, this mama sign has dipped her buckets into the water and would carry them back to her hooch, which would look like something like this, and put the water in these big earthen vessels, and the impurities would settle to the bottom, and they would dip water off the top. That would be their cooking water, drinking water, etc. And when we were out, if our canteens got low, we'd take the dipper and put some of that hooch water in our canteens, drop a couple of water purification tablets in it, shake it up, and move on. Another pretty typical looking peasant's house out in the Delta. Again, made of nipa palm. I looked up on this one day driving along, happened to see this fisherman who was taking his net up. All all of the water in the delta is tide water, tidal control. So when the tide's out, all the little creeks rescind, and you may be able to tell there are a couple of fish that you can see in his basket. So apparently he got some fish out of his net. And I was also intrigued by, I assume, his wife and his children all watching him and watching me. I was a RTO for approximately a month, and just as quickly as I got there, I was told one day at the end of the day, pack up your stuff and head back to the battery. They've got a different job for you. And I thought, am I being punished? Not that I enjoyed being out in the field that much, but there was a lot of harassment back in the battery. And I had more freedom, especially when if I had a day off, what was called a stand down. I didn't have any duties. I could sleep. I could hitch a ride into Saigon, or pretty much do whatever I want, write letters. But he said, no, you didn't do anything wrong. He said the guy that was his tiers clerk is rotating back to the States, and we need somebody that can do the records. I didn't even know what they were talking about. I'd never heard of this. Is anybody in here? We got veterans in here. Anybody know what a tiers clerk is? The Army has an acronym for everything. It's the Army's Equipment Record System. So I kept records on all the artillery pieces, the 5-ton trucks, 2.5 trucks, Jeeps, 3/4 ton, and a few miscellaneous things like that. And they told me when, again, I was not trained to do this. This was an OJT type kind of thing. But they said the records are a mess, and they were. Now,
That's gross.
this is a rat, not a squirrel. But it's a squirrel-sized rat. And they were very prevalent in Vietnam, particularly in the Delta. They lived in the paddy dikes during the dry season, and then the rainy season particularly, they wanted to find drier quarters, meaning our hoochies. And they would burrow into the walls, and you'd hear them at night just running all around. This is down in the motor pool. My office as a terrorist clerk was right next to the motor pool, and I did have to keep records on all this equipment. This is a captured Chinese machine gun, Chinese-made machine gun that somebody had confiscated, and I was just showing it off. Now, what I'm doing here is pretty pleasant in comparison. This is during the rainy season. You can see water everywhere. I was digging a little drainage ditch out from underneath my office, and I'll explain my office in a minute. But right here, this was the latrine. And notice there, I think everybody knows what an outhouse is. These were like modern outhouses, but instead of a hole being dug, which here you can imagine how deep you could dig a hole before it filled with water. These half-sized 55-gallon drums, they were cut in half, and a half was slid under each one of the seats. And someone had the wonderful job of sliding these cans out away from the building, pouring some diesel fuel in, igniting it, and then taking the board and stirring it around to make it burn better. We had a word for it. I won't use the word here. That was latrine duty. And you can see that's what's burning in the background here.
Smelled real good too.
First thing I smelled when I got off the plane was that. And I think if I walked outside now and I smelled it, I'd say, oh, that's...
At 2 in the morning too, where it would go straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was unmistakable. This was my home for about 7 months. Again, it's constructed of ammo boxes filled with earth, tin roof with sandbags on top. And again, that's a community. We did not have any electricity in there, as I recall. I've got two shots of this I want to show. This is during the dry season, and notice out here in the rice paddy, it's just very dry and hard packed. But we have like a boardwalk leading to this, because during the rainy season, there's the same hooch, and this is what it looked like. And you walk a little narrow path to get to it. We had a fire and explosion one night at our motor pool building. When I first got there, as I recall, it was a wooden structure, and it got totally destroyed. So one of these big tents was erected over there, and that was the motor pool. I think the rest of the time I was there. Just another shot during the rainy season, and our drinking water. We had water buffalo or water trailers, but there was a water purification system that was set up over here, and they pumped water out of there and purified it. And that was one of the showers. They put a 55-gallon drum, and it was either filled by the rain or during the dry season. They pumped water up in there, and you'd get in, you take what people usually call a Navy shower, because Navy ships carried water, but there are limitations how much water you can carry. Pull the string or whatever and get a little water on you, lather up good, and then pull it again to rinse off and get out. No lingering in the shower.
Those,
and no hot water.
It's warm though.
those two
Yeah.
structures to the left, towers, no, there, what's that?
I don't really know. This is sort of on the other side of the compound from where I was. Like I said, we did have some electricity for generators. Some of that could be that. Some of it's communication.
It's comms, signal comms line.
I think most of it's commo.
Yeah.
Just another shot during the rainy season, and it would start raining, maybe rain 15 minutes and stop, and the sun would come out and it would just be sweltering. And then the next day it might rain 20, 25 minutes. And it would keep on going until it reached a crescendo during the middle of the rainy season, and it might rain for a solid week unseasonably. You can imagine trying to move around, even going from one building to another. This is what it looked like. This was like mid-afternoon during one of the monsoon rains. We call the Vietnamese women sandbag dollars. They filled sandbags. They were paid $1 a day. They did other things too, like laundry and housekeeping, particularly for offices. We didn't have any to do housekeeping for us peons, but officers and some of the senior NCOs did. And they, of course, they did not live in our base camp. They lived down in the village, and they would come in every day and then depart every day. Here are two that are actually clearing out a drainage ditch. And again, this is our main street right here. They wore the cone-shaped hats, and during the rainy season, they had plastic covers to put on them. They made really good rain hats. This was one of my trips into Saigon, and Saigon was a very large city. Lots of people. These are mostly students here that you see. Bicycles, pedestrians, little pedicabs, a bus with all kinds of stuff on top, and people and even some farm animals that put in the buses going to market. Sidewalk vendors in Saigon selling everything from produce, pineapples there, electronics, contraband stuff that black market stuff.
Chickens.
Yep.
Both ways.
Anybody know what this is?
U.S. Embassy.
Good guess. It's the presidential palace
President.
in South Vietnam. This is where the president of South Vietnam lived. Again, I'm in the back of the truck. We rode by it. I snapped a quick quick shot. You see the guard here, you see the gate. Take a look at that gate, and, you know, kind of like White House in a way, you know, a majestic looking building and a nice secure fence and guards, stuff like that. A lot of you probably saw this, but this is next image is one I did not take. 1973. Excuse me, 1975.
75.
When Saigon fell, this was the first tank that breached the wall. Can't crash through the gate. And I think probably a lot of us saw that on TV. It was a very sad time. One of the more pleasant things I got to experience when I was in Vietnam, our battalion sponsored a picnic and field trip, I guess you'd call it, to Saigon for orphans from a Catholic orphanage. And we each were put in charge of a couple of the children. And these are all guys from my battalion who were there. And we went to the Saigon Zoo. And these little girls were very well dressed. Couldn't speak to them. I mean, they didn't speak English. We didn't speak Vietnamese. But you could just tell from their expressions and everything that they were having the time of their lives. And we had a very good time as well. One of my buddies shot this of me helping this child into the back of the truck. And I see somebody's Kodak camera here. When I first got to Vietnam, I had a little Kodak Instamatic camera because I could stick it in my pocket and carry it with me. And then eventually I bought a secondhand camera from somebody and ordered one. It took me forever to get what I wanted, but I finally did get it. And this is right outside of Tan Son Nhut Air Base, which is right out of Saigon. And you could see anything and everything on the streets there. I mean, people riding with little small motorcycles and little small cars, military vehicles, big trucks, commercial trucks. And then this guy right in the middle of the road is jogging along with his carriage there. This is Tan Tru Village, a little village that was about 3/4 of a mile or so from our base camp. It was located on the river. It was a very scenic area. This is on that same river. This mama son with her 2 children. And everywhere, even when you found a scenic view like this, notice the concertina wire around. This was, I guess, the main street of Tan Tru. The big building to the right is the market. I've got a shot of the market in a moment. And I don't know how many days a week they had market, whether it's one day or more than that. But I was fortunate enough to be in the village one day when the market was in operation. And you can see the bananas and all kinds of produce and everything. Their bananas were really tiny bananas. But they're pretty tasty. They tasted like bananas. Another area of the market where there were silks and other kinds of fabrics for sale. And these were generally there every day. This fellow I saw fairly often when I went through I think he must have been a resident there. They loved American cigarettes. Cigarettes with barter. They particularly like Pall Mall and Salem.
Salem.
A lot of those too, but if you had a pack of Salem, you could get food, you could get somebody to do laundry for you, you could barter for just about anything you wanted. I was kind of intrigued by his appearance, particularly his undergarment here. You guys will recognize that. You weren't issued those in Vietnam, long john underwear, but you probably had it if you had basic training or any kind of training in this country during the cold weather. You were probably issued these. But he's wearing these long john, probably 50% cotton, 50% wool underneath his undergarment. This is a traditional Vietnamese women's garb. It was called the Alzai, and they carried parasols for sun. You know, we most of us don't carry umbrellas for sun, but they did. This was down on the river. Some people lived on these little sampans. And time, Fritz?
Yeah. Do you want to try to wrap up?
Yeah. I can run through pretty quickly. I think South Vietnamese compound. Two things here, soft drinks and coffins. This is right outside of our perimeter. There was a bombing mission going on with an F-105. And the last month or so, I was the unofficial battery photographer. I was sent on a mission that was named Chickamauga. It was an air mobile in the plane of reeds. You've seen the plane of reeds. And Chinook helicopters would come in, land, and then attach to the Chinooks in areas that were needed with these firing platforms that could be leveled. 105 millimeter howitzer with bags of ammo. This was inside the Chinook and looking down through the window of the Chinook at the baggage. Lowering the howitzers, and then once everything was in place, the Chinooks would land, the area would be secured, and they would unload all the other provisions, start unloading the ammo boxes, then fill the ammo boxes with earth, fill sandbags, and start building gun positions. And I've got two shots of this same area. Notice the men here setting up things, assembling rounds, their ammo boxes there. Notice there's really nothing there. Notice this stump for reference. There's a stump. They've now constructed a little bunker out of sandbags, a little bit of metal, and ammo boxes. They have rounds stacked up. They've got their cube ready. This was a tent that was the fire direction control center for the operation. And they're on a fire mission. They're actually firing this. There's the tent over there, and you can see the towers for the communications, the water buffalo. And then when the mission was over, this one took about 3 weeks, I think. And I went out a couple times and shot it. And they would come back and be directed in by a yellow grenade here, and this a smoke grenade. And the last shot I took in Vietnam on the ground was my Freedom Bird. And so that was ended my tour 401 days later. If I have a moment or any questions, I'll try to answer those. Yes, sir.
Having not been in the service at this time period, when you were working at the fire base as a clerk, what was your daily life like? Did you have breakfast, lunch, dinner? Or did you just have one meal? And what were you eating? You look pretty good in the pictures, right?
We drank a lot. When I say drank a lot, I mean water, sodas, Coca-Cola stuff, beer, provided. It was hot.
Oh, yeah.
And hydration, and a lot of, I was pretty healthy. But a lot of that was water retention, really. But we did have a mess hall right there, and most days they served 3 meals a day. I'd forgotten this, but I had it in one of the letters. I think it was on Sunday. They had kind of a weird time for meals. But anyway, and I was telling Joan one day, I remember going in there, I ate this. I don't remember anything about it.
So nothing remarkable.
But I know eggs were powdered eggs. They weren't all that palatable.
Yeah.
Milk was, powdered milk. And I just, there was no meal that, oh boy, I remember Thanksgiving. And I know the military, they make a big deal about Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Turkey and all the trimmings. I cannot tell you what we had for Thanksgiving Day. I think I had guard duty on Thanksgiving. So, I don't know, my day would be to go in, work on the records. I had a daily report to do every day. Then I had a monthly report to do every month. And if First Sergeant logged out a Jeep, you go to Saigon, I had to put in the speedometer reading. If fuel was put in, I had to have all the records, and everything had to balance. And in between that, toward the end particularly, this was during the time of Vietnamization. I didn't point out, but when I first went over, we had the largest contingent of American forces in Vietnam, about 550,000 men. And then they gradually started pulling people out. And sometimes the guns would be short-handed, and they would enlist us to go. So I started out humping rounds, artillery rounds, and I ended up doing some of that too when I was needed for that. But I had guard duty about probably 3 to 4 nights a week, and then other details. There were always details. Truck would come in loaded with sand they pumped out of the river, and they wanted to unload it. And there was no mechanization or shovel. But that was pretty much what my life was like then. And yes.
Maybe on a little lighter note, when you said details, it seemed like you were always having to clean something. You must have become a master cleaner. I would like to hire you to come to my house, because I'm sure you remember it.
Well, I will answer you with something that we all were told. There are 3 ways that you can do things. There's the right way, the wrong way, and the Army way.